at the top of this. If we want to accept that, otherwise that notification will stay there the whole time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle Stephanie Kraus, and this is my colleague.
I'm Marisha Marks, instructional designer with the Center for Online and Digital Learning.
And we are here to present as part of our Practical and Accessible Workshop series, Designing Inclusive Presentations with Google. So our goal today is, if you haven't attended a previous workshop, is that what we try to do is to cover the topic from a practical standpoint of key tips, tricks on how to actually use the software, how to incorporate some of best practices on things to make things more effective or efficient for you, with also incorporating accessibility into the presentation as well, so that it becomes something that is part of your practice and not something an add-on that you do after the fact to make things accessible, but it's part of our daily practices. So practical and accessible. I do the practical side, Marisha generally does the accessible side, and we interject in between. Anything else you want to add, Marisha?
That sounds great.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just start off with giving you, and as everyone can hopefully see the screen, this is going to be our session outline for today. As I mentioned before the recording started, we will have some interjection of polls and playtime to be able to get people to go, not too long, just so I know that if some people want to go through the whole workshop, we'll also leave time at the end for people to kind of play around and ask questions. So we're going to talk about slides under Wonderful World of Slides, the reasons why people use slides, the various interests and things that people do with them, because not everybody uses slides in the same way. We'll then also talk about the practicality of creating Google Slides if you haven't done that before. So we'll go over a quick little tutorial on that. We'll also then talk about some basic features and tools that you may or may not be aware of, so just making sure we catch you up on that. We'll also talk about principles of design. Now, we do have a corresponding website page that goes with this. When we do these presentations, we give you a snapshot of what is a bigger section of the website page, so that the presentation can kind of keep going and it's a little less lecture-y. So we cover a couple basic principles of design and how they're also going to be related to what Marisha talks about when we go into the accessibility section. So we'll talk about that. Marisha will go ahead and talk about the make it accessible part, and then also modality considerations of where you're using this content. So with that said, I'm just going to start in on the presentation part. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. And when we have our breaks, you can also feel to go on the mic and ask, or just continue to do the chat, and either myself or Marisha will respond. So the wonderful world of slides. So one of the things that we just wanted to do was to talk about that PowerPoint and Google Slides are indispensable tools widely used for various contexts for creating and delivering presentations. So in the business world, they're essential for pitches and sales and presentations and project updates. In education, teachers, educators rely on them for lectures, student presentations, and interactive lessons. So they're also used in training or student presentations, creating interactive lessons, and they're used also during conferences and during seminars to disseminate information and engage audiences. Various different philosophies and structures about how to engage people in that, and that could be a workshop further on. This is more of a basics workshop, but we're going to kind of just talk about that the basics of slides and presentations, and we're going to focus on Google. Additionally, some people use Google Slides to create collaborative projects with each other, because you can share these. So if you're doing a project for your office or for a department, you can also have one singular presentation that you all share and either present singularly as copies or that you present together as a group. So they serve as a powerful medium for being able to storytell and create narratives to captivate and inform their audiences. So basically is that it's used in education, it's used in business, HR, it's used all over the place, and people use them for a variety of reasons. Creative uses is something we wanted to just interject for people because sometimes people don't always know what are the creative things that people do with slides. So choose your own adventure stories are interactive narratives that engage the audience by allowing them to make choices that influence a storyline. So by using hyperlinks in PowerPoint, you're able to move back and forth, and the format adds some engagement to things. People also use digital scrapbooks, digital signage and postage. So some people create all their posters using a presentation software. And additionally, as we mentioned before, group work. If you're making a manual or documentation, you also might choose to use that. Additional examples of how this is used are also going to be on our website after the presentation. So be able to check that out and see some other examples of creative and unique ways to do presentations. So if we go back to the example of the Choose Your Own Adventure, for those of you who are familiar with that, it's an adventure series from the 1970s and 80s, and this method takes the format from a book series. So if someone wanted to do a Choose Your Own Adventure presentation, what would happen is that the book series basically gave you a something to read and then said you can either choose to go to the next page or go to page 34, and you kind of played with the paging to tell the story depending on how you wanted to do that. In PowerPoint and Google Slides, what you do is you use links to create those stories. So people can actually click on links to go to different slides throughout the presentation, and it's not such a linear structure. So besides doing generic presentations where you're going to be presenting to a group or an organization or students or staff, you can also use these to create interactive activities such as this Choose Your Own Adventure. Any questions so far? That's kind of just some basic overview of the different ways people use presentations. Okay. The next thing, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to dive into creating Google Slides presentations. So again, this is going to be some of the basic stuff. And the first slide that I want to do is just kind of go over how to create a Google slide. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you open the Chrome browser. Now you can use Google products in Safari or Edge, which was what was Internet Explorer. But Google is actually the company that makes and updates Google Slides. So you're going to get most of the features and functionality if you actually use the Chrome browser. If you don't have that browser on your computer, you can also contact the help desk and they will help you to be able to put that onto your own computer if it's a work computer. And then there are also instructions on how to do that on our website about how to download the browser if you're doing it to a personal computer as well. Now, what you will want to do is go to google.com. You will want to find the Google Apps button and then go to the button that says Google Slides. And then you're going to be able to choose from new or from a template. What I'm going to do right now is I just wanted to show you that slide to see that that's just a really quick 5-step progression. What I want to do is just show you really quickly how you do that on the screen. So let me come over here to Google. All right. So when I'm at www.google.com, I'm going to go into the upper right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to look for the Google Apps button. Now that 9 dots, some people call it the dice button or whatever it might be, but its technical name is Google Apps. When you click on this button, you're going to get a menu. The menu is going to give you all of the apps that are available to you on your account. Your personal Gmail account may look different than your stick Google account based on the permissions because of the license and what we have. Now, one thing to let people know is that when you click on this menu, you might be saying, Kyle, my icons are not in that order. You can customize and personalize these icons however you want by on the menu dragging them around. So if you find yourself using certain applications more than others, you can always drag them up to the top or down to the bottom, depending on your interest. So don't worry if it doesn't look exactly like mine. I've moved mine to the ones that I most frequently use. The most important thing is you're going to want to look for an icon that has a bright yellow box or looks like a page with a little tiny white box in it with an outline, and it says slides. Click on that button. And when you do that, now you're going to be taken to Google Slides. And this is how you would create one. Now you can always start by just creating a blank presentation, which will just start you out with some basic formatting, and then you can go from there. Or if you are interested, there is a thing called the template gallery. And if you click on the template gallery, which is a button in the lower upper right-hand corner, you click on this, it's going to give you a series of different options that are available to you if you'd like to change color, make adjustments, those kind of things as well. Sometimes people want to start with something a little bit more, or if you're going to do, say, like a timeline and you don't want to create, you just want to fill in text, there might be particular slide decks that would be appropriate for you. Now, Stick also has a slide deck if you're doing an official slide deck for Stick, and that is actually through the marketing department. And so that's also an option for you. But this is just to let you know, if you're creating a slide deck and you would like something more than just a generic white or slide deck, you can go ahead and go under the template gallery to find so. I'm going to go ahead and just click on the blank presentation, and this is going to open up Google Slides for me. So let me make sure I don't miss anything when I do this. Okay, so I'm going to switch back really quickly because we're just going to talk about a couple quick things on Google Slides. So am I sharing my screen? Okay. So Google Slides Basic. So the one thing is that we've taught, I just showed you how you're going to open Google Slides, and what you want to do is you're going to choose new or from a template, but you're also going to be able to add existing content and also import from Microsoft Word. We're going to cover in a few moments how to add slides to your presentation, how to update the theme of your presentation, and move and arrange slides, and then maybe talk a couple of things about other features that people generally want to know. So just wanted to let you know that we did cover the basics about how to start, and then we're going to go into some of the more like specific basics that are just common, but you may or may not be aware of. So let me go back to Google Slides for this. And so I'm going to say we're going to get into the show and tell part. Okay. So sharing my Google Slides here. I'm gonna go and share. Okay. So when I first open up my Google Slides, I have the opportunity, so I'm going to click on here. I'm going to have the opportunity to see a main menu. As that loads up, there's going to be a main menu at the top and menu items that you can have for as a pull down. Then you're going to have on the right-hand side a little index area that as you build slides up, you're going to start to get different slide components. You can click on those slide components, and that's how you navigate between slides. Google Slides will always give you, if you just choose the blank template, it's going to let you choose a plain black and white template with a title and a subtitle. Now, if you're interested in adding slides to your presentation, you can go ahead and click on, you have the menu bar, and the menu bar is going to have a search feature that's going to let you look for words if you're trying to find a particular slide, any kind of anything you're looking for in the presentation. But you're also going to see a plus button. Most of the time people will click on the plus button, and all that does is going to duplicate either the slide that's existing or your main slide. My main slide in this example for the Google template is to have a title at the top and to have an add text box available. However, next to the plus button to the right of it is going to be a new slide with layout button. This is going to allow you to select different layouts depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If your presentation has maybe sections and you want to have a section break, you can come down to selecting section header or selection title with description. It's going to give you more formatting options. Now, there are programs, or if someone gives you a presentation, this may look different depending on the presentation that you're looking at. So you're going to see other colors and images and things like that. If you look at the Stick template one, it's going to have all the slides are going to have Stick related content on them that you'll be able to pull down and put onto your slide. So if I wanted to start with something that is a section title and description, I can just select that icon, and now I have a slide that separates from the other slides that and their layout. So if I wanted this to be chapter 1, I now can just type in here chapter 1. And so that lets me choose a different layout as I wish. Now, one of the things that you can also do is when you have the slide deck is that you can hold on to the slide deck and move the slide anywhere that you'd like. And when you look for a blue icon, or sorry, a blue line, that's going to actually place and let you move the slide deck around. If you want a different view of the slides, you can go ahead at the bottom left-hand corner. You can select that and it's going to give you a grid view. So if all you want to do is just see all the slides in the presentation and not edit it, just see where everything is, you can do that. But once you click on this, it'll take you back to that table of contents area and you can alter and edit the slides. So if you ever click on this button and be like, I don't know how to get back, just double click on any slide and it will take you there. So if you have a slide here that you want to incorporate in, you can do that as well. Now, a couple options that you have available to you is that if you go under File, you have a couple options to import slides. So you can make a new slide deck up over and over again. You can open a new slide deck and make a new tab, but you can also import slides from other presentations. So if I click on Import Slides, you'll see here, it's going to allow me to upload any slides that are in my recent, and also my Google Drive. So if I have presentations that say, I always have an introduction to my lectures, and I just want to paste that in every single time, I could just have a presentation for that. Or if you're tailoring a presentation to a particular audience and they need a disclaimer or anything like that, you can always have one of those type of things made up, and then you can just incorporate it by importing that slide deck as well. You also have the ability to upload a content from a Microsoft PowerPoint as well, and that would let you bring in the content of a PowerPoint from Microsoft. So if you had some slides from Google and some slides from PowerPoint, that would let you do that. What I do want to just give you a heads up is if you do import anything from PowerPoint, your formatting might be a little off and you might have to go in and make adjustments. The two softwares are fairly good at working with each other, but the formatting sometimes doesn't properly match. So you're going to have the option to be able to import slides from other presentations, and then you're going to also be able to import slides from Microsoft Word. If you need to make a copy, so say you make a template of this and you want to have that be, this is the template for this particular lecture, or this is the particular presentation topic. Like if, Casey, you were doing a workshop series and you wanted to make a template up, you would be able to create it and then copy it over and over again. It would let you be able to make a copy of that. You can also copy only select slides. If say you want to start like, oh, I have 5 slides here and I want to be able to have them be a separate presentation, you can also section them out now and be able to do that as well. Additionally, you're able to share your presentations either with others by adding their name to the presentation, and they will get an indicator that says that they have been shared the presentation. You can also do what's called publish to the web. What this does is it gives you a link that you can give to people, and then it appears like a website to people. It doesn't let them necessarily alter any of the content. It just shows them the presentation without any of this type of infrastructure. None of the menu bars, none of the windows. It's just a solid presentation. You can also embed that into any Google site or just share that with people if you don't want people to alter or edit things. And then the download, there's just a couple more things I'm going to talk about on this menu, and it's going to be that the download feature, once you've created a slide deck, you can download this to go back to Microsoft PowerPoint. You can also turn this into a PDF so that students would be able to get an actual printable copy without having it be an actual Google Doc, and you can print it out if you want to, but also that if you want to turn any of your slides into images, we did do a workshop on Google creating accessible images. You'd be able to do that as well here. So it's just to let you know that you do have the ability to download and put into other formats for whatever viewing is possible. If you are a Blackboard user, then you would know that you can, yes, you can have a link to Google Slides and it would open up Google Slides, but you can also save your presentations as a PDF that would also then be viewable within the screen for your students to view, if you didn't want them to take them outside of Blackboard in doing so. Other thing to let you know is that if you ever make a mistake when you are doing a presentation, version history lets you go back and look through your entire history of a presentation to be able to go retroactively back to a certain point. Sometimes someone will make a change and you want to get some content or a word change. You can do that and just grab the text and then bring it back. But if you want to restart from a certain point, you can do that as well. So please be aware that you do have the ability to go back versions, but when you go back to a version, there's an option to either leave or to copy over everything you've worked on. So you have to just be careful. If you're just looking for a text box, you can just copy that text box and bring it back to the current presentation, or you can actually remove everything you've done to that point and start back from a certain point. So if somebody got exit, like I always tell people, this is a student presentation that I do, and my students sometimes go a little crazy, and if it goes off the rails, I sometimes have to wheel it back and go back an earlier version and start over again with the students if they're doing practice things as well. But that's just to let you know that if you went backwards and were like, I thought that I put something in there, you can always go back and see your version histories. So that's going to be the basics of editing and creating a Google slide in that. And then the other part, just for basics, is to show you is that you do have the ability to insert content into your Google Slides. If you select image, it's going to let you upload images from your computer, search the web, and now there's a whole thing about GIFs and stickers. Additionally, if you're using Google Photos or you have the URL, if your camera is attached to your computer, or if you're using Google Drive, you can also bring in pictures from the images as well. The one thing I want to just give a heads up for GIFs and stickers is GIFs are actual animations. They're little short things that do repetitive motions, and sometimes they'll be like cat waving. I have one in here later as an example, but there's a GIF that's available and it shakes a lot. You want to just be really careful about adding GIFs to things. It's a cool thing to search for, but it can be a little bit distracting, and it'll be one of the things we talk about as a consideration for accessibility. When you want to grab something from your computer, you can go ahead and click upload from your computer. But if the item is also on your desktop, you can actually grab it from your desktop, and you should be able to just drag it onto your computer, from your computer onto the screen, and it will automatically upload that. We will also talk about alt text, because when you put images onto presentations, you do need to place a name on them so that screen reader users can identify them. And again, Marisha will talk a little bit more about that. You have the option to add a text box into your presentation. You can also add audio, you can add video, you can add shapes and tables, all sorts of different things, charts, diagrams, those things as well. But for the most part, we usually are going to just stick with, for basics, images and text box. If you want to create a text box, you're going to select insert text box, and that's automatically going to give you a little plus symbol. And from there, you can add text into that. And then you can start typing on there. You can also and if you want to get rid of it, you just click on the box itself and hit delete, and it will go away. If you're using a plain template here, you can always just type in the box and keep the format that is current with the template that's being provided to you or that you're using. Now, once you've established and created a template, you have the ability, and this is going to be a really quick suggestion for people, and this is one of the things that's kind of a more advanced thing, is if you have a structure to a template and you want to carry that across your entire presentation. So if you look at our slide deck, there's a bunch of like different blues and different sequences. What we have done is under, let me go back here. Here's the insert. Oh, there we go. you're going to be able to adjust a master template. So I'm going to open up a presentation that already exists. 1 second. Just to let you know, let me just open up something else that already has some formatting on it. So let's just do this one since it's ours. What'll happen is that you can go down to I'm looking for the you can go down and you'll see that this template, if you click on here, we have different colors. So remember when I said the plus button lets you add a new slide, and this downward arrow, depending on the slide template, is going to give you a different set of templates that you can pull from and add to your presentation. If you want to add or make adjustments to your slide, you can always do what is called edit theme. Edit theme lets you change all of the layouts that look exactly the same. So on our presentation, we have these headers that belong like this. You can go ahead and for every slide that looks like this, you can make adjustments and changes. And when you do that, it's called changing your master template. That's going to allow you to actually change the template as a whole across the entire presentation. So that's a little advanced, but the reason that I'm bringing it up is that when we're going to start talking about consistency and layout, if you're looking to make a consistent template that you use across certain classes or presentations, you have the ability to create a template for yourself that also, whenever you add a slide, every slide is added, color, the font, all of that is added, and you can customize that. So I wanted to just point out that you do have the ability, once you get a little bit more comfortable with Google Slides, you'll be able to manipulate them to make a template that is more accessible and also is maybe more consistent with a particular type of presentation that you have. So with that said, we've talked about just adding a new slide presentation, making a copy, importing slides. What I want to do is just give everybody about 5 minutes to open up Google Slides, play with the file menu and the insert menu, and just see if there's any questions that come up, just playing with Google Slides. If you're already familiar with it, then just take a moment to still play, but we'll take about 5 minutes to play with a generic Google Slide. So if you're also running into any problems about how to get started, we can also do that as well. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my share right now. And so so it is going to be 1:30 in a second. So 1:35, we'll just start back up. People can go ahead and play with it, add images, drag things in. If you have any questions that come up, we'll talk about that.
Kyle, do you want to pause the recording for this time?
Yes, I will. Okay, so we just had a few minutes of playtime. You could go ahead and explore. What I wanted to do is we're just going to talk about a couple things that are under principles of design. And this is because, for the most part, a lot of the reasons and decisions that we make, they're based actually in artistic and theoretical principles of design and layout. And some of these things are really important. And as I mentioned before, on the website, we're going to have a lot more of the different terms and definitions, but I thought I would cover just a couple of them just for you to be aware about. So why follow them is it's crucial to make visually appealing and effective design. It maintains consistency, it helps organize information, it guides the viewer's eyes. It also helps with communicating your message clearly. Using principles helps content creators, and I know that teachers and I cringe when I hear the word content creator, but that's actually what we are, is it helps us as content creators create designs that are visually engaging, functional, and effective. And in doing that, they can also be accessible. In the bigger picture, following design principles also asserts the standards, ethics, and integrity that an organization sets for itself. So let's take a look at a few things, design principles to consider. And as I mentioned, more information is going to be available on this following the presentation. So the first thing I want to talk about, and on the screen, I tried to demonstrate that one side on the left-hand side is an example of what would be low contrast, and on the right-hand side is an example of what would be high contrast. So contrast is basically the arrangement of opposite elements, light versus dark, large and small shapes, things that just basically are opposites of each other to create visual interest, excitement, and emphasis. It distinguishes elements and highlights key parts of design. It also helps learners with low vision, visual acuity issues, and learning differences relating to color and print. So if you look on the screen right now, just as an example, is the image that is the one to the left, or the text that is to the left, there isn't a lot of contrast between the black text and the blue background. So it's often awkward to read, actually difficult to read, even if you didn't have low vision, visual acuity, or a learning disability, it would be difficult and would cause eye strain. It also doesn't give you an understanding of what is the most important thing that is available, like that the color becomes the predominant, not the message of the text. So the image on the right-hand side, or the text on the right-hand side, is making it clear that the text is the most important thing, and that the background is just simply color for emphasis. And even so, this could be a lighter blue, and that would give a little bit more contrast as well. And Marisha usually talks about contrast checkers. There is a way to be able to check the contrast of text to images and images to any type of color backgrounds of things as well. The next topic that I want to just give you a heads up on is considered white space. So empty space between and around elements of a design. It creates balance and organization. It provides clarity by visually spacing elements from each other, sometimes referred to as negative space in art. So it supports users where text may intersect or blur with other texts or images. If you look to the section that is on the left-hand side, that text is the same exact font size as the text on the right. However, the line spacing between them has been diminished. And so it may be more stress on someone's eyes. It also may blur this text. It also may encourage individuals who have a visual issue of seeing text to be able to have a more difficult time discerning letters and characters as well. So white space is that kind of empty space that's in between text that kind of helps you be able to read and review. It also is a practical, causes less strain. It lets you put emphasis on the thing that's most important. And it also just makes it available for all users to be able to read. Next thing that I just want to share with you, and this one is like, I got the gift there for you, Dan, is visual hierarchy. So this is the arrangement or presentation of elements in a way that implies importance, using techniques like size, color, contrast, and spacing to create an information hierarchy that guides the viewer's eyes and navigation. Now, I'm going to say that I have, in many of my years working, I have seen many a website, I have actually seen a syllabus that looks like the upper left-hand side in the past. Luckily, not really a stick, but what it does is that if it's causing more strain for you to view, so that's the first thing. But also, I'm not really sure when I'm looking at the section that's on the left, what is actually the most important thing to read. Someone has placed text, has placed color, has placed underlying, has put a GIF in there that's a bit distracting. I'm not sure what the most relevant or important sequence of reading this is and what I should take from it. The content, which is the same text on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, this is that the image is a static image. It's not causing distraction. What I want you to do is see a title. And so that title has got a different color and is got a heading applied to it. And then also I have my introductory statement. And then instead of putting those carets, I used bulleting to actually separate out the text. So if you're reading this, you're seeing the structure that it's an easier read and an easier lift for people to be able to read if you're paying attention to the arrangement of how you're putting your handouts, your worksheets, and your presentations together. So visual hierarchy really kind of has an important play in when you're building practical and accessible content. The last thing that I just want to talk about is what's called agnostic design. And this focuses on creating layouts and interfaces that work across different devices and platforms without making assumptions about the specific characteristics of any device. We have computers, we have tablets, we have phones, projection, all different types of media. I even can watch things on my watch. So what agnostic design really does is it prioritizes universal usability and accessibility, regardless of the user's device or platform. It talks about a thing called, we talk about it being called responsive design, which means that the content adjusts to the size and viewable window of a screen or for the user. It may look different, but it maintains the consistency for the user experience on various and different devices. Now, this is a little bit, sometimes it's kind of like, well, how do I design like that? One of the things is just to be aware is the basics of, if you are building something that is going to be going on a website, it potentially can be viewed on other devices. And just to be aware that those might look different. So as you're building something, it might help to look at your website page while it's being built on a mobile device. That's just things to let you know if things look right, if images appear correctly, that kind of thing as well. If you're using, say, Google Sites or even some things in Blackboard, they're going to automatically make adjustments now because you're building in the system. But just to be aware that this design format allows for you to be able to think across multiple platforms. So for example, and then I'll just talk about this. So this is the this online and digital learning resource, the student resource website that we have. And this is a page on there. So this is the activity stream that's in Blackboard. And when the person looks at our website on a computer, this is the screen that they see. They see an icon and an activity stream and a video, and then some step-by-step instructions. That same user goes onto a tablet, and now the screen is going to make adjustments and go straight down the page. And so the video is going to be here, my instructional text is here, everything's just going to go straight down the page. If I get onto a mobile device, my text is going to go longer down the page, and my video is still going to make adjustments because it's set that way to adjust to the size. But it's just being aware that different devices have different views, and that when we're creating presentations, when Marisha talks about the size of fonts, it's really important, because you might think that a 10-point font on a slide is okay, but when it goes down to a mobile device, that 10-point font is even smaller. So the advice about what minimums are for presentations or things like that often come from the fact that when we use the minimums, that allows for a level of scalability in your presentations. So you don't have to necessarily do an amazing, like, you don't have to test everything you do on different mobile devices, but just to be curious is look at the content that you're writing and then open it up on another device and see if it actually is as friendly as you hope that it is. So agnostic design just really acknowledges that the content that we create is going to be viewed on many different types of screens, and we just have to be aware of that. So those were the four major components that I wanted to just bring up about design and design principles. And as I said, the website will have more components on there after the presentation. So that is all that I have about the basics of slides and design principles.
I
And
just wanted to speak to your last point, Kyle. I think it's really good to hear that, because there's so many times that our students are just using their phones to communicate, to do their lessons. That's their computer.
right.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and an example that some people aren't really aware about, which I'm trying to do a little bit better of a job, is that Blackboard has an app and Blackboard has the website. Using the website, trying to use Blackboard on your browser, on a phone, or on a tablet is a very bad experience for students. When they get the app, it's a better experience because the app is actually made for it, but the app changes content on the page. And so we need to be thinking and be aware that when we create content for the desktop computer, it goes back to that 10-point font thing. That 10-point font is so much smaller on a mobile device. And just being aware of that is even just the first step. And then we can have conversations about how to make things better. And again, with accessibility, if you make something accessible from the beginning, it's going to be able to be shared across multiple platforms, and more students, more faculty, staff have access and ease to that content. So this is where I'm gonna tip my hat, and I'm gonna hand it over to Marisha for the remainder of this presentation.
Wonderful, thank you, Kyle.
Want me to stop?
Let's pause and let's. Wonderful. Okay, so we're back and we're going to jump into the accessibility considerations for presentations. And we're really going to do this in two parts. So in the first part, we're going to go through the basic principles of accessibility. And as I go through this, what I encourage you to do is think about the types of presentations that you deliver, the types of instances when you may use Google Slides for your work, for your teaching. Because then in the second part, we're going to talk really about the different applications, the different modalities in which presentations may be used. So then that's where we're going to refer back to what Kyle has talked about, refer back to this piece that I'm going to be talking about as we talk about those different modalities. So the first consideration that we want to talk about is cognitive load. And this really goes hand in hand with a lot of the principles that Kyle was just describing, related to white space, related to the design of your slides. So you want your content to be as easy to understand as possible. And to do that, you want to balance the visual information, the text information, and the audio that may go together with the slides. So in thinking about that, think about the words and the pictures. So you're starting with designing slides, and then you may add audio on top of that. So when you're designing your slides, you often have some kind of text, some kind of words, and then you may also have images that enhance the information and help your audience understand what it is that you're trying to say. And so your images may be decorative, so they may be kind of like an embellishment, they may be a border around your slide, or they may be kind of just like a pretty flower in the corner. They may be representational, so if you're talking about the structure of the heart, you may put an image of a heart onto your slide. Or they may be more analytical, they may require more thought from your students. So relational images, so images that show how different things relate to each other. So again, if you're talking about the structure of the heart, rather than just putting a picture of the heart, you may put the way that blood flows through the heart. There may be arrows, so you may have that relational aspect. They may be organizational, so how do different aspects of the image or how are they organized to enhance the learning? How are the different components where it becomes more of a diagram than just an image? Transformational and interpretive. So when you're thinking about images that you may use with your presentation, the images that encourage the person viewing your slides to think, to analyze, and to interact with the image are going to lead to more learning than images that are decorative or representational. So in choosing images, think about images that are going to be more relational, organizational, transformational, interpretive, and less decorative or representational. When you're adding images, think about the ways that the text that you put on your slides interacts with the image. So you want the text to be really aligned with graphics. So in the diagram that I have here, so I have a diagram of a carbon cycle, and it has a lot of little labels on it. And the labels are right over the image. So where the learner sees the text is also where the other aspects of that text tie in. So the text is close to the arrows, the text is close to the data that is being presented. And again, that's going to help the student learn from this image better than if all of the text was pulled out and then like a paragraph down below the image. And then when you're talking about the image, if you're presenting this live or if you're recording a video based on your slide presentation, you may present your image as part of your slide, but then you're also going to explain what it demonstrates as part of your narration. And if you're explaining it as part of your narration, then you no longer need additional text on the slide. So you have maybe one big caption, you have one big title, sorry, not caption, caption applies to something else. So you might have one big title, you might have some keywords that are really integral to the image itself, but then the deep explanation is going to be part of your narration. So that's where you're trying to create a balance between the three aspects, the text, the visuals, and the audio. And you're trying to balance them so that there's not too much of either, and there's a little bit of redundancy, but not too much redundancy. So then you want your slides to really be clean and clear. So you want to have that white space that Kyle was talking about. So you want to make the text easy to read, create that spacing between the lines of text. You want to avoid any extraneous graphics. So that goes back to minimizing purely decorative images or purely representational images. And same thing with avoiding extraneous text. So if you have a diagram, you don't need to duplicate what is in the diagram in the text. And then as you're thinking about using your slides for learning, you want to think about chunking. So how can you break up the content that you're presenting into bite-sized pieces? So kind of the way that Kyla and I here are talking, we're having sections, we're stopping for breaks, we're giving opportunities for questions, so that even though we do have a longer presentation, we're breaking it up and giving time for asking questions and for interacting and processing the content. So now we're going to get into some of the more detailed aspects of actual accessibility. So we've referenced alternative text several times already. And what alternative text does is it allows for somebody who visually can't see images that are on your slides to still be able to gain information from those images. So you're going to want to include alternative text on everything that is not already text. So if you didn't type it in, then it's probably some kind of image. It might be a chart, it might be a graph, it might be a diagram, it might be a shape, it might be a picture. So it might be a GIF, as we were talking about earlier. So all of those components on your Google Slides are going to allow for you to add alt text. When you right click on any of those components, you'll have the option to add alt text, and then you'll see a little box where you can type some text in. So when you're typing that text in, that text is going to be context specific. It's going to be a short phrase or a very simple sentence. So think about like Twitter or X, kind of very short, 140 characters, one short sentence. Here I have an example of a picture of a lotus flower. This lotus flower may be used in a botany course, or this lotus flower may be used in an Asian culture and history course. The way that the alternative text is going to be written for those two different courses is going to be very different. So the alternative text is going to relate to the meaning that you are trying to convey. So this lotus flower, it's a fairly simple image, but what you want to say about it may vary. So you may want to say that it is a pink flower on a green background. Or you may just say you may talk about the mood that this flower conveys. Or you may have a much more complex image. So we're back to our carbon cycle diagram. When you have a complex image, you're no longer going to be able to convey the meaning in a short sentence. This carbon cycle diagram has a lot of information in it. So this is where you're really going to have to analyze the diagram and figure out, okay, if you are working with somebody who can't see that atmosphere is 750 and that it incorporates CO2 or carbon dioxide, what information does that learner need to know? So you may take some of the data that is in that diagram and actually convert it into a table and put it on the slide as a table. You may use the slide notes area to actually write a short paragraph that goes deeper into what the meaning of this diagram is and what the learning associated with this diagram would be. And then if you are teaching using this slide, or if you're presenting with this diagram, you're going to need to verbally describe what that image is. So when you're talking about your slides, keeping in mind that not everybody is able to visually see the same thing that is being projected either on a screen or on a projector at the front of the room. Whenever you have color, you may have learners who can perceive all the colors of the spectrum. You may have learners who can only perceive certain colors of the spectrum. And you may have learners who choose to print your materials out on a black and white printer. So in the example that we have here, we have the first bar graph that has a blue, a red, and a green bars. And for somebody who can see all of the colors of the spectrum, it's pretty easy to tell that there's blue and red and green. When we convert that bar graph to a simulation of what a color blindness would, how a person with color blindness would experience it, the red and the green become very hard to differentiate. By adding texture to our bar graphs, even if somebody can't perceive color, it's still much easier to perceive the difference between the different bars. So in the second example, that is in the middle towards the right and all the way on the right, that includes texture along with the colors. Even when our red and green bars are combined to become kind of that brownish color, we can still differentiate which bar is which. So being aware that not everyone is able to perceive color, and then creating as many alternatives to color as possible so that you're not using color alone to convey information. As you design your slides, you have a large section below the slide itself that allows for you to add speaker notes. And that space is a really useful place to incorporate additional information. So if you're sharing your slides out with your audience outside of a live presentation, they can interact with those slide notes, they can read through them, they can kind of see what you would have said verbally. And it is also a place where you can elaborate on things like alternative text for complex images. Okay, and I see that there's a question. Alt text is in the edit menu, right? I think not all versions of Google Slides have alt text, the alt text item. So you right click on the image, and when you right click in that drop down menu, you will see alt text, because you do it for each specific image. And I'm actually going to show you a tool that will analyze your entire presentation and check for any images that may be missing alt text. All right, so again, Kyle talked about fonts a little bit and fonts that are easier to perceive and depending on device sizes. So you want your font to be as easy to read regardless of what device the student is on, what visual limitations the learner may have. So sticking with 24 to 40 point font, it may seem really big, but I find that by using a large font, it also helps me design my slides that allow for a more balanced cognitive load and better chunking, because it prevents me from putting too much information on any one slide. If I know that I'm not going to use any font smaller than 24 points, then it really limits the number of lines of text that I can put on, and it really forces me to create additional slides. And there's nothing wrong with having a part 1 slide and a part 2 slide that continues on the same topic. Then you do want to have sans serif fonts. So sans serif fonts are fonts that don't have any embellishments on the letters, so they don't have any of those little feet on, like the I's and the T's. Verdana, Arial, Calibri are all great choices. There's other ones out there as well. High contrast fonts. So if we have a little bit of time towards the end, I will show you the WebAIM contrast checker and how to get into the colors. But just starting with a black or dark blue on white, or like a bright yellow on blue, something like that, something that's very high contrast is gonna be a good starting point. And same thing as I was showing with the bar graphs, being very careful with use of additional colors, avoiding using color as a way of conveying information, and then avoiding anything that may distract from your text. So avoiding watermarks or background images. So if you do want images, placing them next to your text rather than having your text overlay on your images. And Kyle is pointing out that this presentation, the smallest font is always a 24-point font. So on this slide, the bullets are in 24, and I believe that the titles are in 32. Kyle did a great job of talking about slide templates and slide layouts. The great thing about templates and layouts is that they help to create hierarchy within your slide. They automatically add a title field for your slide. So that then if somebody's navigating through your slides, they will know what the title is, and they can use that kind of like as a table of contents of locating the specific slide and getting the information that they need. So by using slide layouts, you already have titles, and then all you need to do is put information into that title field. You do want your titles to be unique so that navigating through slide titles becomes easier. So if you do have a part 1 and a part 2, that's totally fine. So if I want to have creating hierarchy part 1 and then creating hierarchy where I talked more about layouts, I could have a creating hierarchy part 2, something like that. And then if you want to check the order of your slides, you can actually tab through your slides. So whenever you're on the slide, if you tap your tab key, that'll be the first thing that is read out to somebody using a screen reader. So visually, we see all of the information on the slide at the same time. When somebody is using a screen reader, it becomes linear. It's no longer presented all at once because it converts the visual information to auditory information, and auditory information is linear. So by tabbing through, you will know the order in which that visual information is then presented in the linear format. And so you always want your title to be presented first, and then you want the main text of your slide, and then your images, and for your images, the alt text is what would be presented to the screen reader user. You may want to add links to your slides. Links are a great way to give your learner access to additional information, to an external website, anything like that, or like what Kyle was talking about with choose your own adventure, where you may link between different slides within the presentation. When you create your links, you want the links to be descriptive. You want the person interacting with the link to know where that link is going to go. So if you have a choose your own adventure link, you want the user to be able to know which adventure they chose. Did they choose to go explore the depths of the sea, or did they choose to go explore the island? So to do that, the text of the link itself needs to be descriptive. So in this example here, I have a screenshot of an email that I received back in 2020. And in that email, it said, to view your online registration details, click here. And the words click here were the link. If I was a screen reader user and I was interacting with this email, I may read the entire email, but again, the information is presented linearly, so it takes a long time to get through the entire email before I get to the bottom. Or I may be thinking, oh, I bet there's a link here somewhere. And then I can have my screen reader read just the link to me. In that instance, it would say the word link, followed by the words that were linked. So in this instance, I would hear link, click here. I wouldn't have the context of the information to view your online registration details, click here. I would only hear the words click here. I would have no idea where that link was going. So if you were to redesign this email, what would you do? How could you change it?
Wouldn't you change the name of the link to either conference or registration so that it's obvious?
Exactly. So you would change it to something like online registration details, or registration details, something like that. So that then I would hear link, registration details. So even if I didn't have the full context of the full email, I would still know where that was going. So Anne is suggesting click here for registration details. So it's always a balance between giving the information that you need without using too many words, because all of those words need to be spoken out and speech is quite slow. So it's tricky because we've had a lot of conversations about whether people know that something that is blue and underlined is a link and it's something that they need to click on, or if they need to be told that it's something to click on. So it depends a little bit on your audience and whether you think that your audience already knows that blue underlined means that it's a link, and then you don't need to say click here for something.
But
like
I have a question about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Having a link, I would imagine, presupposes that this is a presentation that they have online access to, not something that they're listening to in a lecture.
That's exactly right. Yep. And so we're going to come back to that when we discuss modalities and in the
Okay.
ways that you would use your presentation.
Got it. Thank you.
But yes, exactly. And Dan, so Dan is asking, how do you handle color blindness? And that's why you have both the blue and the underline. And it is actually a recommendation to not underline things that are not links, to only use underline for things that are links, because the underlining is a way to convey the link to somebody who can't see the blue text. Yeah, Casey, is that another question? No, you're good. Okay, so yeah, so blue underline, but because it's underlined, it also conveys the information that it's a link. So avoid underlining things that are not meant to be a link. And to add a link, you would highlight the text that you want linked, and then from the insert menu, you can select link and then you put in the URL, the address of where you want that link to go. There's also a little link button right in Google Slides. So again, when we have a little bit more playtime towards the end, we can look at all of those options. And then I see that there's some discussion about speaker notes. Kyle, do you want to jump in and address that?
Sorry about that, hit the wrong button. I just wasn't sure I was addressing Anne's question, is that if you're not seeing speaker notes, it may just be that you have show speaker notes checked off, or you can drag it up from the bottom of the presentation screen. But if you are sharing a slideshow and you did not select presenter view, you will not see, if you selected start from the beginning, it won't show you the notes. You have to select presenter view in order to see your notes if you're presenting.
Okay, I see that I do have up here in view, show speaker notes is checked off.
Mhm.
However, I don't see the option showing up when I'm looking at the presentation that I would hypothetically be sharing with someone else. And where do you get to presenter view?
So under slideshow,
Uh-huh.
there's a downward arrow.
Okay, I see slide, but not slideshow.
Where you're at share. So you have your on the far right hand side, you have your icon, and then there's a blue share button, and then there's a slideshow button.
Okay, yeah, all right. Uh-huh.
The downward
Okay,
arrow
presenter
there.
view.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
That's going to show you a view where there's a separate window of your notes
Uh-huh.
and your presenter view.
Okay, I see the speaker notes window showing up. Okay, thank you. So you have to get in there by,
So that's to view your speaker notes while you're presenting.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I see that to build them in, you have to go to share.
No, to build them in, the presentation will have there at the bottom, if Marisha shows you, there's a little line here. You can drag that
Okay.
line and it lets you bring it up and down.
Okay.
So
Right.
if you
Well, when we
You're
have
seeing
a,
my screen right now, right? You can see this space down at the bottom.
okay. When we go to playtime, I'll mess around with that and see if I can get the sequence down.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so.
Oh,
let's-
Marisha, can I interject one thing?
Yeah.
Also for Dan, in terms of the blue link visual, it's exactly what Marisha says. But what I know that sometimes people ask me that because there's also, you know, the blue, green and color blindness. It's because that link is to indicate it is a link. The other thing that I also wanted to just reference is in that bad example that I showed, the bolding, like tons of bolding, changing colors. That also is a very big distraction. And so if you incorporated that on top of like mixing up link things, I usually say it's like, how much emphasis do you really need for something? And then that's where you need to restructure your language. So if someone's using a lot of bolding throughout their entire writing, it probably means that they need to work on the hierarchy and the structure of their content, because you shouldn't be bolding so much text visually from an accessibility standpoint, but also from a design and layout. If you're putting a lot of color and font within a paragraph, it generally means you probably need to work on the hierarchy and the structure of the text itself.
I have a colleague who does that all the time, and it's like every single word is so emphatic.
Yeah, and it's not. So
All right, so we just went through the top considerations for creating the most accessible presentation that you can. And we have an awesome tool at Stick. It's licensed by Stick. It's called Grackle Slides. So Grackle Slides lives under the extensions menu. And if you've never used Grackle before, the first time that you launch it, it will ask for you to allow access to your Google account. It has been reviewed by IT for info security, so you're safe to do that. And then once you've done that, you will be able to launch Grackle Slides. And Grackle has something like 22 different aspects that it checks for within your presentation. So it will check for alt text on your images. It doesn't know if the alt text is good or if it's appropriate for the context of what you're trying to teach. All it does is it looks to see, is there something in that alt text field? If there's nothing in that field, it will flag it for you and it will give you an opportunity to add alt text. If you're copying images, sometimes from a website, sometimes from one presentation to another, they may come over already with alt text. In those instances, it may not pick up the fact that alt text is missing. So it's not a human, it didn't do a full accessibility review of your presentation, but it is a good start to see some of the issues that may be coming up in your presentation. It will flag contrast issues, it will check that all of your slides have titles. Sometimes when we use templates, the templates are not designed in the most accessible way. And so there's something that to me looks like a title, but it's not being tagged as a title. So then if Grackle picks up on the fact that the title is missing, I need to change the layout so that I can have that title field brought back in. It will check if there's repeated titles, as well as about 15 different accessibility considerations. So really great tool, give it a try. So it's available for Google Slides. It's also available for Google Docs and Google Sheets if you work in those tools as well. Okay, so before we go into modality considerations, any other questions up to here? All right, so then what we're going to do is we have 4 different modalities, and I'm going to show them to you, and we're going to talk about how the student or the learner is going to interact with the slide, and we're going to think about which of the accessibility considerations are going to be the most relevant for that audience and how to make that slide the best learning environment for your audience. And then after that, we'll stop again, and then we'll have some more playtime where you can practice adding alt text, practice adding links, work with Grackle, and we can answer some more questions. All right, so our first example is the most traditional classroom. So we have a presentation, we have learners seated in the classroom, and we have slides that are being projected at the front of the room. So for these learners, what accessibility considerations are going to be the most relevant, the key considerations for them?
Well, right off the bat, you said that if there's anyone with a color blindness issue, that could be problematic. They might not see the differences. And there's so many colors.
Yeah, so in this example of these of this bar graph, there are a lot of colors and a lot of very similar colors. And so if we have anybody with color blindness sitting in this fairly large classroom, so the chances are pretty good. Color blindness is fairly common. So yeah, working with color and making sure that you're either using texture or you're talking through color, through what is being presented, so that there are other ways to get the information that is needed. Dan is talking about font size. So absolutely, the bigger the room, the more you're going to have to be extra aware of font size. So in classrooms, the rule of thumb is 2 inches of height for every 10 feet of distance. So if you're going to be presenting in a room, use your steps, bring in a tape measure if you have one easily accessible, and just think about, okay, what are the sizes of the letters that are presented, and how far back are my learners sitting? So not just the front row, but the way back row where students love to sit. Are they going to be able to read the letters? And so put up one of your presentations and see how big those font letters are actually going to be in your room, because that's not only going to be dependent on the font size, it's also going to be dependent on the projector, right? Because different projectors are going to be, some rooms are going to have bigger screens, some rooms are going to have smaller screens. Exactly. So the fact that this graph is missing a title, that is an additional problem. So we want the text and the images to convey information. We want them to be aligned well, so that, again, coming back to some of those cognitive load considerations. In terms of color, we also want to think about any glare or projector brightness issues. So if you're going to be teaching in a room that's fairly bright, making extra effort to make contrast even higher. Talking about bad eyesight is common too. Yes. So visual impairments are really a spectrum. We're not just talking about somebody is blind or somebody can see. There are so many different aspects that affect students or learners' ability to see, whether they wear glasses, whether they brought the wrong glasses on a particular day, whether they have allergies and their eyes are not working as well, whether it's been a long day and they're feeling tired. All of those considerations definitely make it extra important to then talk through the information that is on the slide, so that there are all the different ways for students to obtain information. And I see you're saying I'd never let my students use a graph that doesn't explain itself. Yeah, for sure. And Dan, you're saying me among them. So you're talking about eyesight, or you're talking about not letting students use a graph without a title? Both probably, or yeah, eyesight. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. I definitely have that as well, where some days, like, I can sit all the way in the back of the room and I can read anything, and then other days, maybe my contacts, I've been wearing them for a little bit too long, and I'm like, what does that say? I can't see anything. As you're talking through the visuals that you're presenting, that's where we're coming back to decorative images versus content images. So decorative images are less important to describe, but if you have something that's content, like a bar graph, a diagram, a chart, anything like that, that's where you have to present it in all the different ways that your students may be perceiving information. And then, what other ways can you give students access to this presentation? So if this is a class and you know who your learners are going to be ahead of time, do you have the option of posting your presentation in Blackboard? Or if you don't know who's going to come in on this specific day, can you make handouts, or can you make a link so that somebody can open up your presentation on the go? So that if they're having a harder time seeing it at the front of the room, can they pull it up on their own laptops? Or can you give a handout so that then they also have the option to take notes, if that's a good learning environment for them? Any other thoughts or considerations about in-class presentations?
Well, as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, I have a presentation I have to do on Wednesday to the nursing orientation students, and it's on Title IX. And Title IX is a very short statute. It's 37 words. And so I was thinking, well, if I had, and it's important that students know what Title IX is, but I was thinking with something like this, I would read it. It's that short, you know? And so I would imagine that with anything that you're doing like this, the verbal, of course, if you have a deaf student, again, it gets back to knowing your audience. You may need somebody to sign, but I don't know who's in the audience. So, but anyway, that's what I'm thinking, you know, rather than just have the text, I think maybe reading something might also help.
Yeah, so with something like that, like whenever I have a quote or anything like that I put up, I do like to put that text up so that it's visible, but then I also read it out. Yeah, Kyle.
I was also just going to interject. I'm a big fan of also brevity to how long you stay on a slide. The amount of times we've ever, especially in a class situation where you put up a slide and then you talk for 10 minutes about it, that's not making the slide as effective. So, you know, thinking about your presentation, Casey, it might be that like you can have the statement up there, but then you can have bullet points that address the certain components of it, or chunk it up by sentences and just kind of play through them. There's kind of a thing of like, it's like 4 minutes and 60 seconds. So it's 20 sides, 20 seconds each. And it's talking about just being like, making it more kind of a movie, not a movie feel, but like, that's kind of how it ends up being, where you're really kind of making the slide have an impact, a statement, and moving from it instead of maybe staying on one. Like in this case, it made sense because the slide's just here while we're having conversation, but trying to make sure we move from slides to slides where you're not being too static also might be a different way to think about how you present.
I think I really
Yes.
needed to hear that because I always have too many slides. That's my problem. I'm always way too content heavy because there's so much. So I'm really trying to pare that down. But I appreciate you saying, you know, keep it moving too.
Yeah, and it could be that, you know, you have that statement that you want to do. How do you now just keep yourself to that and make it still a story that moves and is engaging? That's that piece. And yeah, we all have it. Like Marish and I are building presentations all the time. And it's like, if I'm spending too much time, and I tend to write my slides out so that I can practice them and get comfortable with them. So I have text with it, but it's also so that I make sure that I don't make my text, my slides too dense. And I think it doesn't matter in what environment, because if you record something and you sit on a slide for 3 minutes, that's just as bad as sitting in a room and sitting on a slide for 3 minutes. So yeah, if you think about it more of like you're telling a story, when you tell a story, you switch things and move things around. So for me, I'm never as upset about many slides as long as they're not so content heavy that it's like you're spending so much time on each slide, but the slides are kind of navigating you through the story that you're telling.
Some of the best
Thank you.
presentations are TED Talks where there is one slide. And it may be just to use for emphasis or something. That is not necessarily going to work for a classroom in which there are non-English speakers or hearing impaired people who benefit from having the text. But for Catherine's situation, if there were also a whiteboard or a blackboard around, write out Title IX by hand. Talk and chalk is the most efficient way to get information across. Too bad it doesn't work for anything that's especially information dense. But if you could have Title IX written out someplace at the same time you're going through the rest of your presentation, it's always there to remind you and remind your audience of what you're going on about.
Well, or even a
Thank you.
handout,
Great.
right?
That's a great idea.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed you, Marsha, what did you say?
Oh, I was saying that, or you can even put that on a handout.
Yeah, yeah.
You could put it on an index card.
Right.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
All right, so let's go to our next modality. So a webinar presentation. So a webinar presentation is live synchronous. So that's essentially what we have here right now. That's where we are. There's a lot of overlap with in-class, but not 100%. So what are the considerations that you would think about for your slides for a webinar presentation?
Responsiveness.
How so? Say more.
Well, if the webinar is going to be viewed on a monitor or a computer monitor or a projector or a smartphone or tablet.
So like how quickly the information loads.
Yeah, or if it's like smaller ratios or smaller scales, it'll look more pixelated on a projector, where if it's more like small images, it'll look smartphone, you know.
Right, so we're talking about the resolution of the images. So if you have images that are very high resolution, they may be slow to load, particularly for somebody who's on a slower internet connection or who's connecting using a phone rather than Wi-Fi or Ethernet.
And the white space too, white space of text and stuff like that.
Exactly, yep. So all of those white space, all of the text size considerations are going to affect those small devices just like they affect the large room. And then Kyle is saying that Zoom on a mobile device can be tricky to see those images and text. Exactly, yep. And just like in the room, we had considerations related to glare and contrast. Same thing is going to be on a mobile device. If somebody's on a mobile device outside, then those glare considerations are going to be even more of an issue. And then again, if you have any images that you're presenting and then talking through those images, so thinking about, okay, which images need to be verbalized, which images are more decorative, which images convey content. And so thinking about students who may be listening into a webinar where they're not even looking at the screen, right? I've definitely participated in webinars where I was driving, but I had to get on a webinar. And I'm like, okay, well, so that phone is going to be somewhere far away, but I'm going to listen in. And an experienced presenter will present in a way where I can get most of the content, even if I'm not looking at the device. And then just like we were talking about sharing the presentation with our learners who come to the physical space, whether that's in a handout, whether that's with a link or with putting a link into Blackboard. In a webinar setting, you can put a link in the chat, or again, you can email a link out either before or after the presentation. Yeah, Kyle.
I think also this is where audio and like transmitting audio is kind of really important to just remember your context. So like when you're in the physical room, you have to be aware of projecting out. And sometimes people say, oh, well, I'm loud enough, but that's making assumptions about how well people hear. So sometimes the mic isn't because your speaking voice is loud enough. It's because they simply can't hear all the way in the back of the room. That's just not how audio travels. Same thing here is being very cognizant of what's the things in the background that are distractions, that kind of thing, being very conscientious of audio. That when you're speaking, and can they hear you actually talking about and describing things as well?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so our next use case is going to be asynchronous learning. So This is where we're sharing out our slides and our learners are interacting with them without us. So they're not in a webinar, they're not in the classroom, they're just interacting with the slides, and maybe they attended the webinar or the in-class presentation and now they're learning from the slides, or maybe these slides really are standalone. So what are the considerations going to be for slides that are just shared out with our learners?
I have a question about asynchronous learning. Is there a verbal component to it usually? Is there a recording that goes with it?
It depends. So sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. So sometimes it's just the slides. There is a way to add audio into Google Slides. At Stick, most of the time, if you're recording like an actually narrated presentation for asynchronous, we recommend using ScreenPal, which lets you record from your screen and anything else, anything that you're showing on the screen, whether that's slides or websites or anything else that you may need to show. But so it could, but it may not.
Okay, thank you.
So for somebody who's interacting with those slides, what are the accessibility considerations that we would want to make sure were available for them?
Well, obviously, if they're visually impaired, you want to make sure they have a screen reader, but I guess most of the computers we use have that, right?
So most computers have a screen reader built in, or there are free screen readers. So NVDA is the free one that can be downloaded onto PC, and then Macs have VoiceOver.
Mhm.
But yeah, but in order for the screen reader to be functional, the design of the slides needs to be in a way that will work with screen readers. So what Karen is saying, so having hyperlinks. So that conversation that we had about descriptive hyperlinks. So if you have those descriptive hyperlinks, then the presentation is going to become like its own mini lesson. So it's going to provide additional information, and then the descriptive hyperlinks are going to be really useful to know where that link is pointing. So asynchronous use is also where slide notes really come in, because that's when your learners are interacting with slide notes. So whether you're sharing your presentations before, after, or instead of the lecture, that's where slide notes, slide titles, so all of those considerations about building out your presentation, having alt text, right? Because in order for the screen reader to read out your images, you need to have alt text in there.
Mm.
And then that's where it the presentation becomes its own learning environment. And then that's where you can then check your presentation with Grackle and then share it with your learners in an email, in Blackboard, as a link on the website, however it is that you're communicating with your population. And so Kyle just put a link in the chat that's a really good description, example of a descriptive link. So if you want to learn more, check out this Google Slides cheat sheet. And so the words Google Slide cheat sheet is what is linked. And then if you click on that link, you'll be able to get to that cheat sheet. Thanks, Kyle. All right, and so then our final way that you may share your slides with your learner population is as a PDF that may or may not be printed by your learners. So what are the considerations about creating a PDF? What are your thoughts about that? What would we want to do to make sure that the PDF is as useful of a learning tool as we can? Checking spelling and grammar for sure. So you want your presentation to be accurate,
Mhm.
always. What else? Having an answer key. So if you have any kind of, so if you're creating any kind of quizzing, if you have any kind of questions, also giving students answers so that they can then check their information. Yep. So Kyle is also mentioning preview before you send out, did layout change or image display properly? So when you convert from a Google Slides to PDF, it's supposed to keep everything where it was, but whenever you go from one format to another, it's always a good idea to double check, make sure that what you're sharing is actually the way that you want it to be shared. Now, the other important consideration about creating PDFs and Google is that when you export from Google to a PDF, it doesn't always retain the accessibility components that you built in. So if you went through and you put in alt text on all of your images, if you use Google's export, that alt text may not be retained. However, Grackle is going to be your best friend here because Grackle is going to maintain all of those accessibility features and has a really great little print to PDF, export to PDF button. So with that, I'm just going to escape out of my presentation here, and I'm just going to go into Grackle and show you a little bit of how that works. So I'm going to run Grackle right on the presentation that we're in. So up here, it's under extensions. Click on that, get the drop down, and then I have Grackle slides. I'm going to select to launch. And so now it's analyzing it over on the right-hand side. And it's going to give me all the areas where this presentation could be improved for accessibility. So presentation title is required. We got it. A slide should have a title. So it's telling me that there are some slides in this presentation that don't have a tag title. So then if I click on that, I can see which slides are the problem slides. So there's 4 slides that need a title. And then there's several slides that appear to have multiple titles. So that's the issue where you have certain templates that are not tagged as well as they could be. So that's where when Kyle and I work through these, we build it out and then we run Grackle. And then if we see that there's things that need improvement, then we go back and we manually fix some of the considerations. And yeah, Kyle, thanks for the reminder that the first time that you launch Grackle, it may ask for you to allow access to your Stick Google account. So if you see that, just put in your Stick email and then click allow. So it's also going to check for tables. This presentation, I don't think has any tables, but it's going to give you the option. If you do have a presentation with tables, it's going to let you tag those tables. And then up here at the top is your export to PDF button. So if you make some fixes, you can always recheck and you can run those checks as many times as you need. So actually there's 16 total checks. And then if you want to export to PDF, so if you do want to create a PDF of your Google slide, you can click export to PDF. And it's going to ask me to allow access to my Google Drive because that's where it's going to save the PDF and my account. Continue. And so this is where it had access to some of the things from my account, but not others. So now I'm going to go to export to PDF one more time. And so now I can start the export. So it's taking all the information that it has in the Google Slides and creating my PDF. And then it's going to give me the option of downloading it, or I can just keep it saved in my Google Drive once it's finalized.
And the longer your presentation, the longer it's gonna take to process out, so don't worry.
So
if
there it
it's-
is. So now I can select to view it or to download. And if I click close, then it's just saved in my Google Drive. So if I click view, so now this is a PDF of my Google Slides. So the one thing with PDFs is it doesn't actually bring in the slide notes. It just creates one page for each slide. So if you are using slide notes, if you have those longer images, or if you're providing additional information in slide notes, then sharing your Google Slides rather than creating a PDF is going to be a better choice for you. So that's the share button in the upper right. You can always select anyone with the link can view, and then they can view your slides. They can't make any changes to them. If you find a typo, if you make any improvements, those improvements are automatically reflected on the slides that other people see. Whereas if you create a PDF, you have to regenerate the PDF if you make any changes to your presentation. So I'm going to stop the share at that point. We have about 5 minutes left together, and I'm happy to stay on longer if we want. Kyle, I think at this point we can stop the recording.